Hello, this is Trent Taylor. Welcome to our quarterly food and beverage and product labeling and sales practice litigation webinar. We said that's a mouthful. Really appreciate y'all joining us. As you know, we try to do this every 3-4 months. The last one we did was around Halloween, so it's been a little while since we've done one. And we have a lot to cover today. So we have a great starting lineup here of who's going to be talking today. I'm Trent Taylor, and I will be starting out. And then Kate Hardy, unfortunately, had a client emergency, and she's not going to be able to join us today. But Royce Dubonnet will be covering the regulatory aspect of things. Reed Smith is going to be talking about Made in the USA and some new developments there. Jenny Price will be talking about product labeling. Frank Talbot will be talking about sales practices. And Talene Geddes will be talking about Prop 65 and Prop 65 adjacent matters. So that's sort of our lineup. Here is our roadmap for today. I always like to know, make sure that everyone knows where we're going. We're going to start off with some trends from 30,000 feet. And I'm going to be doing that and sort of at the same time talking about new developments in food labeling litigation. And then we're going to change the order a little bit and immediately after food labeling, do product labeling. And then we'll do regulatory, Made in the USA, sales practices, and Prop 65 after that. As always, we welcome any questions or comments that you may have, whether during this program, there's a feature where you're able to chat function or submit question function so that you can do that. And we will try to answer in real time, either verbally or type it in. And if we are unable to, then we'll do it afterwards. And, as we've said before, we really love talking about and thinking about these issues. And we try very hard to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on out there. A, because it's interesting, and B, because we think it helps us as we're representing our clients in both litigation as well as in regulatory counseling. So if you ever have, even if you're not a client, if you ever want to talk about any of these issues, you should feel free to contact us. Or if you have a question, we're more than happy to talk with you about it. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. And with that, let me mention our theme. Our theme is March Radness. We are not allowed to say the other M word for copyright trademark reasons, but that's okay. And, it's not just about basketball. I mean, we all love March because it's spring. I wish it was a little more springy here. It's been cold, but, we're emerging from our long winter naps. And while it's not just about basketball is a big part of it. So on this slide, you can see I am a Tennessee basketball fan, both men's and women's, and very pleased that they are both in the Sweet 16 this year. This is my bracket. Actually, it's not, because and I feel sort of I'm a bad fan because I did not pick Tennessee men to even make it as far as they've already made it. I, like most folks, thought they would lose to Duke. But that comes from the fact that I watched them all year long. So I'm going to give a couple of tips here real quick. I think we promised that in our invitation. My pick, and this sort of goes against the grain because I am a Tennessee fan, is don't pick Tennessee. They play up to their competition, but also down to their competition. And it would not surprise me if they lose tonight. I certainly hope they do not, but they have not been very consistent over the last couple of months. In terms of other teams I like going forward, I like Kansas State coming out of that bracket. I like Gonzaga. I really like Houston. And I like Creighton over Alabama coming out of that one. So I think we'll have some other folks sort of weigh in on what their predictions are as well, including maybe an Alabama fan who may take issue with that prediction I just made. So we'll see. All right, let's get into trends from 30,000 feet way behind the 3-point line. And we're going to start with this image. Here's the general state of consumer packaged goods litigation. It's on fire. There have been a ton of new cases. And I think I say this every single time. I think the pace of new cases filed almost has to slow down, because every single time we do this, we're like, there's a new record, there's a new record. Well, there's a new record. And it's not true that nothing has changed. It is evolving, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. But the volume continues to be just astronomical. One of the things I'm going to talk about here in a minute is there has been sort of a shift in terms of the targets. So let's get into where are the cases being filed. For a while there, I think we were all thinking that maybe there was a shift away from California in this litigation. And that, while that was true for a while, it doesn't appear to be true anymore. Most of these cases, 42% of the new cases filed over the last 6 months or so, excuse me, in this space have been filed in either California federal or California state courts. Now, one of the interesting, noteworthy things is we've seen more cases filed in California state court than we've seen in a while. And there's a couple of reasons why that is the case, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. We continue to see a robust number of new cases filed in New York federal courts. A lot of them in the Southern District of New York, but also the Eastern District and even the Western District. For a while there, Illinois federal court was very popular because Spencer Sheehan was filing a lot there. That has slowed somewhat. Spencer has not filed, he's still filing a lot of suits, but they're not all in Illinois federal courts like they were for a period of time. In terms of the increase in cases, 35% estimated increase in new labeling class actions filed in the last 6 months. And this includes both food and non-food items. But there has been a transition away from food targets and more toward non-food products and dietary supplements. And one thing I'll note is that 35%, that pace has slowed a little bit here in early 2023. It was 47% for the last quarter, 47% increase over the last quarter of 2022. Here in the first quarter of 2023, it's more like 25%. So it slowed down a little bit this year, but it's still a lot of cases. Sales practice litigation, which is something that Frank Talbot will talk about a little bit later, that has remained flat since the last time we measured. But that doesn't mean that there are not a lot of cases filed, because there have been a tremendous number of them filed. It just means that they haven't gone up. So they're still being, just a ton of those have been filed, and Frank's going to talk to you about that here in a little bit. Okay, one of the things that I wanted to mention before we get into some of the spaces and categories that have been filed is I listen to sports radio sometimes when I have time because I'm a little bit of a sports nut. And they were talking about March Madness, and they happened to mention a labeling lawsuit on the sports radio show, which I thought was hilarious. And this was one that related to Buffalo Wild Wings. And they were talking about how crazy it was. And this particular one was filed right around the beginning of March Madness. And I promise you that's not a coincidence. And it alleges that the defendant falsely advertised their boneless wings to imply that they are chicken wings, when in fact they are not chicken wings. They are chicken breast deep fried like wings. And so, it was hilarious listening to these commentators because they were ripping on it, and I think they said they hope the judge, basically finds the plaintiff's lawyer and some of those kinds of things. But the funniest thing I thought was that Buffalo Wild Wings actually responded on their Twitter account to the lawsuit. And here's what they said. It's true, our boneless wings are all white meat chicken. Our hamburgers contain no ham. Our buffalo wings are 100% or 0% buffalo, which I thought was a very clever response. So anyway, I thought that was a little lighthearted. And just so you know who filed that one, it was Treehouse Law. And it made, it was in a lot of news media. It was picked up, like AP and a lot of local news articles were talking about it as sort of a maybe lighthearted legal article that they could include. So with that out of the way, let's talk about some of the current targets in litigation. One of the things I wanted to mention up front is we have seen an increased targeting of dietary supplements. Now, there have always been these labeling suits targeting dietary supplements, but we believe there's been an uptick in them over the last little bit. And that's for several reasons that I will talk about here in a moment. But here are some recent examples of them. These in particular are targeting dietary supplements that claim to improve memory and recall, or natural brain enhancers, that kind of thing. Now, one of the things that you might notice on these particular cases is that you have the same plaintiff. And that's not a coincidence either. It actually is the same plaintiff. You have two Martins there and two Gonzalez. And not all of these on this page were filed by Scott Farrell, but I think all but one were. And he is a high volume filer in California in a variety of matters. And for whatever reason, he has taken to focusing on dietary supplements, particularly on memory and recall supplements. And he almost always files in California State Court, and he often will use the same exact plaintiff in a number of these. So that's one trend I wanted to flag, because I think, there's obviously a lot of dietary supplement makers out there, and they are sometimes maybe not as scrutinized with these type of litigation cases as maybe some other matters, but that has changed, at least from our perspective. So you're going to want to be aware of that if you are in that space. And as we go through these cases and these other categories, you're going to see that dietary supplements form the basis or form the target of a lot of these other categories of new suits as well. All right, so let's talk about the current targets in litigation. As y'all know, I like numbers. I like to sort of, it's one thing to sort of talk about, we think we're seeing this, we think we're seeing that. I like to have hard numbers, or at least estimates of numbers, so that we can get a full picture of what is out there. One of the things that we did is break down the current targets in litigation over the last 6 months or so. 26% of the targets are products that contain microcontaminants. Now, to be clear, this is not just food, it's food and consumer packaged goods products. And that's something that Jenny is going to talk about here in a little bit. We also have ingredients, which we'll talk about. A lot of that's Spencer Sheehan. Natural, no preservatives, we'll talk about that as well. And then not clinically proven, not substantiated. But collectively, these four categories of suits make up 65% of all new cases filed over the last 6 months. Not including sales practices, labeling type claims. These are the categories that we're seeing. And we're going to go through each one of those in a little bit of detail. So let's start with microcontaminants. So this is the breakdown of microcontaminants. Microcontaminant suits. 38% of those suits are targeting heavy metals. Most of those chocolate. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. Benzene, 30% of the new cases, and that's that's a continuation of a trend. I think we've talked before about benzene in sunscreen, benzene in what is it, like dry deodorant, dry shampoo type products, and those continue and continue to make up a hefty portion of these. One thing I will say though on the benzene front is those seem to have slowed to a trickle here in the new year. So there was a ton, like at the end of 2022. I haven't seen nearly as many in 2023 thus far. Then there's bacterial contamination, which can be a lot of different things, but there have been some suits that have targeted, bacteria that's in a cleaning product that could potentially be a problem. It's not necessarily leading to sickness, but it's a claim that it's an economic adulteration type case that their product has bacterial contamination and therefore it's not worth as much as they thought it would be. And then there's the PFAS cases. Now, one of the things I guess there's 2 points on this slide that I want to make real quick. First of all, on heavy metals and benzene, those are important because they have targeted a substantial portion of the chocolate, sunscreen, dry deodorant, shampoo marketplace. So it's not just sort of, a couple of cases here or there. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say all, but a lot of the main players, for instance, in chocolate, were targeted with suits here. And that's important because that makes it a lot harder to benchmark what you're doing against your competitors, because that's one thing that do, like, are we saying something that's, riskier than our competitors? And lots of times if you weren't, you could say, well, maybe there's some safety there in numbers. That's not really the case anymore because these industry-wide attacks are becoming more and more we're seeing a lot more of those than we used to. The second point is on PFAS. So you can see here that only 7% of the new suits over the last 6 months have been on PFAS. I think PFAS is something top of mind for all of us in this space for a variety of reasons. And, we really haven't seen a ton of litigation yet related to PFAS, which is a little bit surprising. And I'm not talking about the environmental water cases. I'm talking about in products, whether consumer packaged goods or food products or packaging. We just haven't seen a lot of those yet, but it is coming. One of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later is regulatory and about the PFAS laws and regulations. And there's already some in effect, more coming into effect this summer, and for packaging, and that's going to lead to more class action lawsuits. And we actually have seen a little bit of an uptick in the PFAS cases really in just the last few weeks. And we'll probably talk about that here in a minute as well. So I just want to make sure that if you see PFAS 7%, that you're like, oh, there's really no threat there, because that's not really the case. And I know we keep saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I really do think it's coming. So, all right, let's talk about heavy metals and chocolate. So there's been over 35 suits filed thus far against chocolate manufacturers alleging that the chocolate contains lead and cadmium. And as I mentioned earlier, the defendants include Hershey, Trader Joe's, Mars, Godiva, Lindt, Mondelez, a lot of different ones. And like I said, this is an industry-wide attack on chocolate manufacturers. And, this is based on lab testing that presumably, and I don't even think necessarily plaintiffs have done, but third parties have done And I think there was a report out about, oh, there's lead and cadmium in chocolate, and then the plaintiff's bar attacks. And that is becoming more common, and I think we're going to see more of that. There's going to be something else after heavy metals in chocolate. I mean, obviously before chocolate, there was heavy metals in infant formula. So it'll be interesting to see what they go to next. But you can be assured that there will be another industry-wide attack on heavy metals or something like heavy metals in a particular food product. So if you have any semblance that there are heavy metals in your products, just be aware of that and prepare now. Okay, PFAS. So this is what I mentioned a minute ago. And what I'll say is, and you can see here, these are 4 suits that have been filed. One in November, one in December, one in January, one in February. So they continue, and these are in foods. There are others that have been filed based on, and I think we saw last summer, it was in the packaging of, particular fast food wrappers, PFAS was. But it's actually in the product itself. So this is 3 of these relate to juice, and then 1 relates to butter sticks. And I believe all of these are Jason Sulzer up in New York. And it'll be interesting to see whether other plaintiffs' counsel decide to go after PFAS in food as well. Now, one other thing I'll note is we are also seeing PFAS in non-food products. And I believe there have been 6 that have targeted tampons over the last month, maybe more like 45 days. So there have been a lot of those as well. And going back to the food for just a second, I didn't have room to put it on here, but there's another one targeting PFAS in a sports drink, and yet another one PFAS in mouthwash. So these are starting, the plaintiff's bar is starting to slowly start targeting PFAS in other, in food products, as well as, personal care products, that kind of thing. And I think we're going to see more of those likely over later in 2023. Okay, ingredients. I'm going to talk about this for a minute. I mean, this is not really new. This has been, an important part of labeling litigation for a long time, especially with Spencer Sheehan. A lot of the ingredient cases are, in fact, come from Spencer Sheehan. And I think we ran the numbers on this. 60% of new cases in this area about, not containing claimed ingredients were in fact filed by Sheehan over the last 6 months. Now, what in particular are these cases targeting? One is lemon. That the product claims it's lemon, and it doesn't actually have real lemon in it. That's one. Another is honey. Claims to have honey, it doesn't actually contain honey. And of course, honey's been one of those ingredients that has been a challenge and a target for a while now. Another one, multiple suits going after creamer because it doesn't contain enough dairy or cream. And then, similar to lemon, a lot of other fruit flavors. Lime, banana, grapefruit, cherry, green tea, not containing those ingredients or not containing enough of those ingredients. I also wanted to talk about nutritionals. And I put these in red because these are dietary supplements, as I'm going back to what I mentioned earlier. And these are not new either. And, I think these continue to be a popular target by certain law firms. And it's essentially that you have the wrong nutritionals. You're claiming it has, 0 calories or 5 calories when it actually contains a lot more. And the plaintiff's bar is getting these tested, and when they find a discrepancy, they are filing these lawsuits. So that's one thing I wanted to flag. In addition to calories, there have been suits related to protein, and that is not a new trend. That has been something that we've seen quite a lot of over the last probably year and a half, that there's a misrepresentation of the amount of protein as well. The other ones that I've seen as of late involve fiber, claiming that you have more fiber than is actually in the product, and another one, sodium, that you have less sodium than you actually do. So that's what we're seeing on the nutritional front. Not containing and containing less cases, there have been a lot of these as well. A lot of these we've already talked about sort of as part of the ingredient front, but there have been some other ones related to non-food items as well. And one of the things that we're seeing, I just wanted to flag this real quick, is the type of arguments that we've seen related to food products is really, they're making the same arguments for non-food products. And that's probably not a surprise, but they're sort of importing those same theories. We saw it with natural, we're seeing it with just about everything else as well. One thing I wanted to mention as well, and I feel like I say this a lot as well, but the numbers are the numbers. I would love to stop talking about natural and no preservatives. Nothing would make me happier. But these still make up, a very high proportion of suits in this space. And, it's not just food, a lot of it's food, but it's non-food products as well. And there has been sort of an evolution to a certain extent. And I wanted to talk about that for a moment. Here are some of the latest ingredients that are allegedly not natural and that are being targeted in these suits. Malic acid is one that I think has been popular over the last couple of years, but we're still seeing a lot of malic acid suits. Another one is citric acid. That's not new either, but still seen. It's a continuation of a trend because we're still seeing a lot of those. Another one is ascorbic acid, also popular. And then we have the next four on here they're not new, but they're not the ones you typically see as much of. And that's maltitol syrup, sodium benzoate, xylitol, and sodium acid pyrophosphate have all been the targets of natural or no preservative suits. And here are three examples of these products, or these lawsuits targeting here. And two of these all three are actually filed in Illinois, but they have been filed in other places as well, especially California. So this gives you a little bit of a flavor of these type of suits. So the bottom line is this: if you are claiming natural on any of your products, whether food or non-food, pay very close, and the same for no preservatives, pay very close attention to whether or not you have substantiated those claims. Because, as I've said before, if you're claiming natural or no preservatives, it's like waving a red flag, and the PLAMS bar is probably going to come knocking on your door at some point, and you're going to want to make sure you're prepared. Okay, not clinically proven, not substantiated. That's not something I'm going to get into. I did want to flag it. That's almost entirely non-food products. That's something that Jenny's going to be talking about. There are a couple in the dietary supplement space that I wanted to mention briefly, but there are a ton of these cases focusing on, you claim this, but it didn't really happen, or you're claiming it's clinically proven when it really isn't. One I wanted to mention, and this goes back to the dietary supplement thing that I mentioned, trend that I mentioned earlier, is there have been a lot focusing on weight loss supplements, and there's one focused actually on weight gain. The first one is weight gain. The other four are weight loss. The bottom four there are all Scott Farrell with Pacific Trial attorneys, who are filing with the same plaintiff for three of those four and filing in California State Court. But he's been targeting weight loss products. So if you're in that particular business, be aware that this is sort of a trend right now. Slack fill. This is also something that I would love to stop talking about, but, and this is a little bit of a surprising one because, it had tapered off there for a while because there were some good wins for defendants in these suits, but they have come back. They were dormant, and like one of the zombies in The Last of Us, they are now back with renewed vigor. So we've seen a significant uptick in slack fill cases in the last 6 months, and a lot of it is Scott Farrell. He has filed 80% of the new cases in the slack fill space, all in California state court. And a lot of those have been cosmetics and dietary supplements, but also some food. And here are a few examples of those. These are all Scott Farrell, and these all have the same plaintiff. So there should be some good, maybe summary judgment, RV motion to dismiss articles or arguments with regard to the plaintiff. And two of these are dietary supplements. One is a food, one is a cosmetic. So just make you aware of that sort of micro trend. All right, I'm moving to greenwashing, and I'm going to hit a few other things real quick, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to do these quickly before I pass the baton to Jenny. Greenwashing, these are cases that we have been talking about a long time, and they are important, but just to be honest, we haven't seen as many of them as I think we thought we would. That may be starting to change. And, y'all are probably aware of a recent case against a retailer for a claim of dolphin safe, where the motion to dismiss was denied here in early 2023, and sort of wondered whether there's going to be more of these type of claims, as well as some recent FTC actions that have been targeting claims like eco-friendly. And one of the places where we have seen an uptick just this month in cases has to do with sustainable seafood. And these are against, Conagra, Walmart, Bumblebee, and they are well-financed plaintiffs' counsel that filed these, two in federal court in Illinois, one in California, and they all filed on the same day. And the claim isn't just merely that, you say it's sustainable and it's not. It's that you're claiming it's certified sustainable, but the certification is hollow, and they're actually not sustainable at all. So these will be very interesting to watch. And, we've seen these before, but this seems to be sort of a renewed effort by certain plaintiffs' counsel to go after this. All three of these were filed by, I believe, Pearson, Warshaw, and Milberg Coleman. So those will be ones to watch, and we'll report back on what we're seeing there. Here's another one I just wanted to mention real quick, supply chain. And there's a particular firm out in California that has been filing suit based on things like, the vendor code of conduct about sustainability and transparency in supply chains is deceptive because it's not true. And then another one claiming that a grower out in California that claims to leave the land better than it found it, and to have sustainable practices and regenerative agriculture, claiming that those are not true. And actually the defendant's methods cause severe harm to the land, the water table, and the ecosystem. And, this focus on the effect on the water table in particular is one that I think is very interesting. And I wonder whether that's going to be something that we see targeted a lot more in the future because of water shortages. All right, quickly, I wanted to mention another micro trend, alcohol. There have been a lot of these against alcohol manufacturers. And one that I thought was pretty interesting was that the makers of Fireball, those mini bottles of Fireball, they were hit with not one, not two, but three class action lawsuits. One from Sheehan, one from Gutride Safier, and one from Bursar Fisher, all with the same claim. So they sort of hit the jackpot with those plaintiffs' counsel. And there have been targeted other ones as well. So those in the alcohol business, in particular, sort of the hard seltzers and the sort of soft alcohol products that are out there, obviously need to be careful because these are being targeted. THC, this is something that probably Voice is going to talk about a little bit as well, but we've seen lawsuits about defendants overstating the THC content in their cannabis products, claiming that they're in compliance with Hemp Farming Act, but actually containing an illegal amount of THC. And then this last one is interesting. It's about Krakotam and about how it is similar to opioids and it's getting users addicted. So just a trend that you should be aware of if you're in that space. And then finally, as I mentioned before, these are sort of the trends that we already talked about, just sort of a summary slide. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jenny.
Thanks, Trent. Okay, I think we fixed the sound issue on our end. We're all three in the same conference room. It's me, Frank, and Trent in Richmond. So we had, sorry about that echo. So getting back to basketball just for a minute on the March Radness, I'm a SEC girl. I went to University of Georgia, and while I'm extremely proud of my Bulldogs and the football season, the basketball season was not as good for us. So looking at the SEC teams that are left, I'm putting Arkansas first, Alabama second, and Trent's Volunteers third at the University of Tennessee, which I'm getting an eye roll from him as we speak. But frankly, I would be happy if any of those SEC teams continued to advance. I love the conference, and it's great to see them on the basketball court doing well, not just on the football field. And I'm actually headed to the Kenny Chesney concert tonight, which when Trent was talking about Fireball, I hope that will not be in my future tonight at the Kenny Chesney concert. But I thought that was interesting. I did not know that it was a malt liquor until today. So very interesting stuff there. Oh, looks like we're getting a comment that I might be on mute. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, I did.
No, it's got to be red.
Can someone else in the maybe in the question and answer let me know if you guys can hear me or if it's an anomaly with someone's computer? Let's see.
Jenny, this is Sarah. I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's move on to non-basketball legal topics. So one thing that we've talked about a lot with the webinars is that there's a lot of carryover between, topics that or causes of action, types of class actions that are being filed in the food space first, that then transition over to product labeling. And you'll see this a lot with a lot of repetition between me and Trent. And frankly, it's because a lot of the food labeling cases that come about also come about. Sorry, I just got the, Ethan, your comment about UGA having basketball is maybe the funniest thing I've seen all week. We do in fact have basketball. Anyways, a lot of the food labeling cases then transition into being brought into product labeling cases as well. And you see that with the first topic. So clinically proven or do not work as advertised, that was first seen in the food labeling sort of area of litigation and has now really hit the product labeling cases now. So the first example is a case that was brought against CVS in the Southern District of New York, saying, and this is, frankly, we've seen this before with the toothpaste. Toothpaste has been sort of hot in the last 18 months or so. And the allegation against CVS is that the gum and enamel repair toothpaste misleads consumers because it states that it's has a clinically proven ingredient to help reverse gingivitis, but the product does not actually, the allegation is that the product does not actually repair dental damage like gum recession, bone loss, or periodontal pocketing. Tom's toothpaste is also facing a similar lawsuit, also in New York, not in the Southern District. I think it's in the Northern District, but those are two toothpaste cases related to, the claim on the label being, clinically proven, and the allegation that that's misleading. L'Oreal is facing a class action in the Northern District of California for false advertising claim, alleging that it has a cosmetic product that states it provides 24 hours of SPF, and the allegation is that it actually does not provide that number of hours of SPF protection. Dior is facing a similar lawsuit related to a cosmetic product for SPF claims. And then Nutrafol is actually facing a class action in New York State Court for deceptive trade practices and false advertising related to clinically proven and medical grade for an anti-hair loss supplement. And then there are also several class actions that are pending regarding air cleaning products that allegedly do not perform as advertised. McGuireWoods is handling, we actually, the three of us in this room are handling one of those class actions. We saw a big, spike in, air cleaning allegations, as well as like with Clorox and hand sanitizers. And this is just another example of that. And, we think that that was due to, the COVID pandemic and sort of like a focus on those types of claims. So the overall takeaway on clinically proven or do not work as advertised is a lot of these are now being brought with non-food products, hair loss, weight loss, pain patches, memory aid supplements. These are all sort of, Trent's talked about a fair number of these, but it's really sort of boring out on the product labeling side as well. So takeaways with this, this is not something that's uncommon. You're going to hear us say this. You probably will hear us say this on every single webinar that we do related to food labeling and product labeling, which is, how do you first defend against these types of claims? And the very first thing that you should do is substantiate. Like if you're going to put on your product or advertise your product, either with marketing or on the label itself, you have to substantiate that claim. So if you're saying that it's clinically proven, you need to have the testing and the substantiation to prove that. And if you do have that, that is going to be the ace in your deck. And we've seen substantiation work for clients where either it's a pre-suit claim and we're able to provide substantiation, testing, or other documents to opposing counsel that's either threatening a lawsuit, that we're able to sort of nip in the bud because of the documentation regarding substantiation, or with warning letters that people get, particularly with this administration, more and more. We've sort of predicted this when President Biden took office, that there were going to be more warning letters that have come out, and that's been accurate. And so if you have the substantiation to address those types of claims that may come in a warning letter, then it makes everybody's life a lot easier to deal with pre-suit claims and warning letters. Once you get served with the lawsuit, you can also use that substantiation to demonstrate that the lawsuit is frankly frivolous. So, a lot of what you can do with these types of cases is do your homework on the front end such that, you don't have concerns about what's being marketed or what's being put on the labels, as long as you can substantiate it with testing and other documents. That feeds right into the next point, which is do not make claims that you cannot prove. So if you cannot say with, documentation that your product can do X and Y, then don't put that on the label and don't make claims about it in your marketing. And then one thing that we haven't talked about for a long time, which is if you do have the substantiation documents and you have not made claims that you cannot support and you cannot prove, and yet you still find yourself facing a lawsuit, whether it's a class action or an individual lawsuit, one thing that we've seen that works particularly well with class actions is really trying to work hard to get a scheduling order or a CMO in place where you have more of the merit side up front. And I'm not saying you totally back burner class action, but maybe you do like a dual process, dual discovery, merits and class action discovery at the same time. But you try to get summary judgment heard, experts and summary judgment heard quickly, because we've had great success with that, with, being able to get out of a case based off of our experts and the lack of experts on, being able to dauber the plaintiff's experts through motions practice and then summary judgment, rather than having to go through all of the class action briefing that can be very, very expensive. So just one thing to think about, I know a lot of times courts are very set in their ways and trying to have class action heard, as early as possible, but it's just another thing to think about. If you do have really strong substantiation and you feel like you have not made any claims that you can't prove, it may be one way to think about trying to direct your scheduling orders to have summary judgment and experts come early. Okay. Claims that the product does not contain ingredients. So this is another one that Trent also talked about. And this would be in the product world. We're seeing a lot of claims on this regarding medications and cough drops. And medications and cough drops, you're primarily seeing claims, like Trent said, related to honey, saying that it contains honey when in fact the allegation is that it, the product is claiming that it contains honey and the allegation is that it actually does not contain honey. Another frequent flyer, which is sort of weird and not necessarily one that I would have identified myself, but for going through all of these causes of action, but bamboo sheets. Bamboo sheets, and saying that the sheets don't actually contain bamboo. That is the allegation in those cases. And there have been a fair number of them. I think there are probably 4 or 5 now that are pending. And then another hot topic is collagen products, particularly in the cosmetic space. Allegation is that the cosmetic that asserts or claims that, and it's labeling or marketing that the product contains collagen, and the allegation is that it actually does not. And then it would not be a product labeling webinar if I did not talk about hand sanitizer at least once. I think that since COVID started, hand sanitizer has been part of my presentation. So slight twist on what we've been seeing in the hand sanitizer realm. There were probably 5 to 10 class actions that were filed involving hand sanitizers and the efficacy of the hand sanitizer to kill viruses and bacteria. But now we see a shift in a new class action against hand sanitizer that it does not contain the percent of ethyl alcohol as advertised on the label. I think that this particular hand sanitizer had stated that it had a 62% ethyl alcohol, and the allegation is that it does not contain that specific percentage of ethyl alcohol. So the same takeaways as before. I think Trent and I have sort of hit you guys over the head with the fact that, you need to substantiate and not make claims that you can't prove. But those are, again, the takeaways from those types of lawsuits as well. And that brings me to microcontaminants, which is something that Trent has already spent a fair amount of time talking about, but sort of the evolution of PFAS, as I'm sure all of you guys know, but you sort of have the fire retardant cases with the alleged water contamination. That then moved into more food containers, like fast food wrappers that we saw pop up heavy and fast last summer, and they've kind of dwindled down. But now you're seeing some PFAS in non-food products like tampons. There have been 6 PFAS tampon cases filed in, I think Trent said, the last 45 days. So I think that those are going to still come. I think they'll probably increase. We've been talking about PFAS for a couple of years, and I think they'll continue to be a area of the law that continues to grow, particularly now that there's such heavy regulation that's in the pipeline for PFAS. And I think that's going to sort of carry over into the litigation world, just like we saw with asbestos. Other microcontaminants, Trent's spoken about the heavy metals and the benzene. The benzene is really, the aerosol type products, whether it's sunscreen or dry shampoo or spray deodorant. And then you're also seeing some bacterial contamination cases, like with the eye drops. So the takeaways on this are substantiation. This includes, I didn't mention this before, I know I've said substantiation probably 1,000 times now, but this includes on your supplier level. And we recognize that that can be a really difficult undertaking to get that substantiation from your suppliers. But one thing that we've found is that if our clients have that substantiation on the supplier level as well, that can make things a lot easier on our clients. So as you're sort of working with new suppliers or continuing to work with old suppliers, I know there's all sorts of supply chain issues that have arisen out of particularly COVID, but really vet your suppliers and get good substantiation from those suppliers on what is being sold to you that you're then putting into your product. And then I would also say, making accurate representations on your products and marketing, and think about this even on like recycling claims. So I saw I was at a conference actually like a month ago with Trent down in Arizona, and they had these bottles of water that were in, they weren't bottles, they were cartons of water. They were in, like a milk carton type container. And they were making a lot of claims about recycling and, natural. And it sort of jumped out at me because I was thinking to myself, like, what kind of chemical was on the carton itself in order to make it waterproof and to hold the water. And that's sort of something that, I think you need to think about, and not just, making claims about what's not in your products, but also what's in the packaging of your products. And how is that going to play out in the labeling world as far as like what you're putting on your labels. And then with that, I did want to mention, I'm sorry, Royce, I did want to mention that there's a big MDL with hair relaxers that's been, that's in the Northern District of Illinois, where the plaintiffs are alleging the chemicals used in hair relaxers are carcinogenic. There are about 90 cases right now. We have some of those cases. Most of those are individual, some are class actions, but and some of them involve deceptive trade practices. But I highlight that just to show that with some of these chemical cases or micro contaminant cases, they're being brought not only as class actions, but also in individual lawsuit capacities. So with that, I will flip it over to Royce.
Hey, thanks, Jenny. So today we are going to be mainly focused on some of the regulatory aspects. I'm a food and drug lawyer here at the firm. I mainly focus on regulatory. I also like to say that I'm a fifth chair in litigation. That means that I'm like on the fold-out chairs behind the main table, providing FDA advice. So the first thing I want to talk about is this THC issue here. I'm trying to advance the slide. Let me push that to the audience real quick. The THC issue here is not just about THC. I mean, it is, but it's part of a bigger trend that we're seeing with product testing across the country. And I think that, I'm going to go into this slide real quick, but I think when we think about the THC potency litigation that we're about to talk about, we also have to think that it applies to Delta 8, Delta 10, vapes, CBD, basically anything from the cannabis plant can be under attack now. So I actually brought a prop for this one. This is called Gorilla Glue, and as a food and drug lawyer, cannabis lawyer, we've got to always have props about what our clients talk about. Gorilla Glue has 22% THC. It's probably one of the most potent strains of cannabis you can get out there, and that matters to consumers who consume this product. In every single jurisdiction, including Illinois, THC is meticulously tested by state laboratories down to, very precise levels of microbes, terpenes, the amount of CBD that you'll get in the product. And I say this because it is the most important thing in many of these states is to get the THC content right. And you're required by law to have a certified state lab testing your THC content. The lengths that states go to get this right is quite extreme. So, but we still have this litigation coming up, which is, in LA, it's alleged that, in California, you have a 10% potency level, kind of range between, how potent can the THC actually be in a vape or a flower product. It's alleged that there's, discrepancies in the amount of testing, and that THC is actually being presented as more potent than it actually is, that the state labs are not testing it accurately. In Arizona, we actually have a lawsuit where it's alleged that the state labs and the growers are in conspiracy between one another to inflate the THC content. Again, I'm not mentioning this because all of you all are in the cannabis business or the cannabis industry. I'm mentioning it because it is, again, anything with hemp, anything with CBD, or basically any product is now being laser focused on by plaintiffs' lawyers, especially products that command a price premium like cannabis and marijuana. So we're going to divert from my favorite topic of THC back to infant formula, which luckily I no longer have to buy infant formula for my child. Infant formula has been front and center on FDA's radar for a long time. It's one of those areas where the regulations haven't really changed since the 1970s. We have conflicting regulations between FDA and the European Union. We could debate endlessly about whether or not the EU regulations are better or FDA's regulations are antiquated. But what we did see is FDA saying that, we did see the shortage in infant formula. We saw allegations that infant formula did not have the requisite materials in it that were needed to be in there, the right ingredients. So, this is a March 23rd, this is a brand new guidance from FDA on infant formula. And, the changes were not that extensive, but basically what FDA was saying is they're emphasizing the fact that all infant formula needs to have a physician consultation along with it, which is kind of maybe a near impossibility in this country. But they're also, it's not just enough to have a hotline. to your company's number. And the other thing that I thought was interesting was it needs to be listed as infant formula. You can't really have fanciful names or, call it, I guess, like super duper happy baby formula. It needs to have a standard of identity that's pretty clear on it. And the other, main point here is I think we're going to see FDA continue to look at child foods, continue to look at infant formula, continue to look at children and the way that they're consuming food products because they are vulnerable populations. And if we look at FDA's enforcement in the past, we always know that vulnerable populations are front and center on FDA's radar because, well, one, that's kind of their mandate, but two, there's nothing else that will tank an acting commissioner than an issue involving a vulnerable population like children and infants. So my takeaway here is I expect to see more guidance. I expect to see more intervention by FDA in this space. And, I would just say that if you have lines of products that are child facing, infant facing, facing towards a more vulnerable population, to double down and double check that the quality, the labeling, everything is looking great on that product, because we have seen trends across industry where FDA is focusing in on vulnerable populations due to lapses either in the supply chain or outbreaks of contaminants. So I'm going to do this third slide here. And the reason I bring this up is, I don't think a lot of y'all are in the medical food space, but this one was an extreme outlier with FDA. I mean, the last time FDA did anything with medical foods, which I'll explain in a second, was when I was an undergrad at Baltimore eating pizza in the dining halls. I mean, this is ancient stuff. 2007, we're now in 2023, and FDA decides to bring out a new medical food guidance. Medical foods are specially designed foods that primarily are used by persons who can't metabolize certain nutrients. We have seen a proliferation of medical foods out in the marketplace right now that may not truly meet the definition of medical foods, but are being basically sold as up-armored dietary supplements. I caution that. We can definitely talk about that if that's in your playbook or in your bag or your inventory. But FDA has come out to kind of reassert its position that medical foods are not drugs, they're not dietary supplements, and they're not just food. They are designed to address specific nutritional deficiencies in patients, and they need to be given under physician supervision, but that doesn't give you the right to put an RX label on it. And a lot of folks have used medical foods in the past and slapped RX labels on them and NDC numbers on them to try to get them outside of the regular consumer channel and into sort of a specialty channel found at physicians' offices or hospitals. And I think that the reason I bring this up is, I think that as innovative companies and as companies innovate and as companies get creative, they want to naturally and should push the limits on regulation and seeing where they can deliver value to the consumer in a way that is also kind of not, running afoul of FDA, but is giving them the most leeway in their marketing. And to have this medical food guidance come out in conjunction with a large proliferation of medical foods hitting the marketplace, I think is signaling from FDA that, look, we're going to take a look at this. And along with this, I think FDA is going to start taking a look at specialty dietary supplements or any sort of specialty food that is hyper designed to address a disease state or a certain condition. That's just my view on it. Look, as a food and drug lawyer, my job is basically to read astrological signs and fortunes and other manners of occult to predict FDA's actions. I'm usually kind of right in the gut most of the time. Sometimes I get it wrong. But I think that we're facing an agency right now that is very much focused on getting things back in alignment that are kind of in the agency's mind out of whack. And that's price premium products that are delivering a premium nutritional support that do not align with the agency's goals or the consumer the consumers, what the consumer is actually getting. I didn't have time to mention Federal Trade Commission, but as you all know, Federal Trade Commission enforces actively in this space alongside FDA. I don't see FDA getting involved in this cannabis issue, nor do I see Federal Trade Commission getting involved in the cannabis issue. But I do see Federal Trade Commission, FDA, stepping up their enforcement on high-priced dollar food items that are claiming to do X, Y, and Z. And we can certainly, there's certainly ground to operate there, freedom to operate as, companies innovate and create more products that meet consumer demands for higher quality, higher nutrition type products. So with that, I'm going to give the rest of the time to my colleague and push it back to Trent here.
Yeah, thanks, Royce. I'm going to mention just a couple of things real quick. We're running short on time, but I did want to mention the new organic regulations that were published by the USDA. It's the biggest update to the organic regulations since the original act in 1990 and increases the requirements for compliance with what may qualify as organic products. So if you want to talk about that in particular, please contact us. We're happy to talk about it. Another one, FTC Green Guide review. As most of you know, it's been 10 years since the last update. The FTC has requested public comment on various potential updates, and the comment period has been extended to April 24th, and that I think is going to impact both FTC actions as well as potential class actions going forward. PFAS laws and regulations, just wanted to folks mention real quick that some are in effect now, targeting or relating to plant-based packaging, but this summer on July 1st in Vermont, it's any packaging, not just plant-based, and I think a lot of folks in the industry are paying very close attention to that. I think we'll skip the milk-based one for now. If you want to talk about it, let us know, and we're going to throw it to Reed now.
Hi, everyone. This is Reed Smith. I am in the Consumer Protection and Antitrust group here at McGuireWoods, and I'm going to talk a little bit about FTC's Made in the USA new labeling rule. But first, since we're talking about March Radness, something made in the USA, the game of basketball. James Naismith, 1891, Springfield, Massachusetts, famously needed something for his physical education students and invented the game with some peach buckets and a soccer ball. And that was made in the USA. He could claim that it was made in the USA, I think. I'm also going to talk about my favorite college basketball team, but you'll have to wait until the end for that one. So Federal Trade Commission activity in Made in the USA, there's a new rule that the FTC put out regarding Made in the USA labels. And so what that means is any label that is put on a product that says Made in the USA needs to be substantiated. And Ginny talked about substantiation in other contexts. And the key here also is substantiation. So what is substantiation in the Made in USA context? Well, all or virtually all of the product must be made in the USA. That includes not just the manufacturing that is done, the design of the product, the finishing of the product, but also the components that go into the product. And that's where we're seeing a lot of companies fall awry, is folks think, well, we have a manufacturing facility in the US. We do everything in the US, including getting most of our raw components from the US. Well, maybe you make a belt and the buckle you buy in Austria. That probably is going to run you afoul of the all or label virtually all standard. Now, maybe you say, well, I can't get that buckle in the US. It's a special buckle that's made by this special producer in Austria, and I think it's better than anything I can find here. Too bad. says the FTC, that does not, the fact that you can't find a similar product in the USA is not a defense to being able to market your product as made in the USA. And so we've seen this labeling rule in effect for about 18 months, and this has really become a significant area of priority for the Federal Trade Commission. One other quick point before moving on, the rule itself applies only to labeling of products, but the FTC also has been enforcing improper marketing of products as made in the USA, perhaps on a website, social media, etc. And that is done under the FTC's separate authority to investigate false or misleading advertising, but really goes hand in hand with this labeling rule. So we've seen a number of recent FTC matters. As I mentioned, it's significant enforcement priority, and we've seen them really across the board in terms of the types of products. Heated mattress pads for truckers, that was an interesting one to me. That can't be a very large market, but the mattress pad said made in the USA when they were really made, I believe, in China. COVID PPE, t-shirts, hats, that was a funny one. The maker actually got t-shirts that said made in China and took off the label that said made in China and slapped one on that said made in the USA. And I see why the FTC went after him on that one. Lithium battery systems. The most recent matter enforcement matter that just came out about a month ago and was finalized 2 weeks ago is against Pyrex. And this was an interesting one. Pyrex manufactures their products in the US and markets them as made in the USA. During COVID, the baking boom, Pyrex found itself unable to meet all of its production needs in the US. And so they outsourced some of their measuring cups to China and imported them. The specific measuring cups said on them made in China. So they actually were not afoul of the labeling rule because the products were labeled properly. But Pyrex continued on its website to say our products are made in the USA and didn't make any sort of disclaimer saying, well, there may be some products that are made in China, right? Also on their Amazon page of the measuring cups that were made in China, it said made in USA when that wasn't actually accurate. And so what that goes to show is, you know, if you want to market your products as made in USA, you have to be very careful about your supply chain and also about where you're making those claims. And if you are making a broad made in USA claim that is attributable to all of your product line, you need to make sure that every single product in your line is in fact made in USA. So what are the consequences that we're seeing? We're seeing, obviously, the companies are required to make changes to their marketing and labeling practices, seeing significant legal fees, even for companies that say, yeah, okay, I'm going to change my practices immediately, still in responding to requests for information and documents, racking up significant legal bills. In enforcement actions, again, which we're seeing more and more common, the FTC is obtaining monetary judgments. Each of the matters I put on the previous slide had six-figure monetary judgments that the FTC collected. And then we're also seeing private follow-on litigation. There has been a complaint filed against Pyrex in the case I was talking about in Maryland State Court, and that obviously Pyrex is having to defend. Okay, so my favorite basketball team is the University of Wisconsin Badgers. I'm a Big Ten guy, Midwesterner, and I liked, I was watching CBS Sports a couple weeks ago, Badgers game. Actually, I think it was Ohio State. You can see from the picture. And they put up this graphic, Blue Bloods in Trouble. And I really liked it because I love this list of Blue Bloods: Wisconsin, Villanova, Syracuse, Louisville. I think there are a lot of North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas fans out there that would say none of these schools are Blue Bloods. I would disagree. In fact, none of these teams did end up making the tournament. and including Wisconsin. But they are now in the semifinals of the NIT, which is still around apparently. So that concludes my portion. Thanks everyone for your attention, and I'm passing on to my colleague Frank.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. But the preseason poll isn't always predictive of final results. And sorry for triggering any North Carolina fans on. I know there's at least one of you on. I'll have to disagree with Reed on the blue blood point of this. In terms of sales practices, class actions, the blue bloods, the ones that are there, sort of always seems to us are pricing class actions, data collection class actions, auto enrollment class actions, and what I've termed as the quote free class actions. They all they're well established. There are certainly others like data breach, things like that, but that's these four broad categories sort of make up the sales practices class actions that we've been seeing recently. The pricing class actions, we continue to see a lot of the traditional ones where online you say limited time offer, advertising with a false reference price. For example, you would have a product that is listed at $100 that's struck through, then has $50 on it, with the allegation that the $100 that's struck through wasn't really the real price. We continue to see ones with administrative fees or other sort of tack-on fees that we've been seeing for a while, but we've also seen some added twists on these fee cases. For example, a paint company got hit with a class action recently related to supply chain fees. And it's alleged that they are charging an extra 4% on their retail prices for this quote supply chain fee. And really what plaintiffs allege is that they're just trying to cover inflation. So we'll see how that plays out. Their online taxes, we've seen a number of those hit. Just online, the way that taxes are collected depends on, in large part, on where the consumer is. And so we've seen a lot of consumers in Missouri that have now alleged that their taxes should be collected at about 4.5%, and companies are collecting at 8.5% or higher, essentially taking an extra 4% for themselves. And then we've seen a number that are arguing that they're undisclosed fees. And while all of these are quote undisclosed, it's really that these transactions, these consumers are going through and they can't even like figure out where the fee is getting surreptitiously tacked on, and the subtotals like just don't add up. So then the data collection class actions, for those of you familiar with the name, image, and likeness rules in the NCAA and in Alston versus the NCAA a couple of years ago. The Supreme Court basically said NCAA can't prohibit athletes from profiting off their name, image, and likeness. So now you have traditional powerhouses like Alabama football who still go out and get the best players because they want to come and play at Alabama, whereas you have reports of other teams, such as those in Tennessee, that have large collectives that are paying players to come because otherwise. I see Trent shaking his head for some reason, but I'm not sure why. But we have continued to see session replay class actions and bot recording class actions that allegedly allow companies to collect and sell personal data and keystrokes. But one that we recently saw filed was against Spokio, who was allegedly creating fake teaser profiles of people that even included their pictures that they were using to try and draw people in to their subscription services. Auto enrollment class actions, again, wide range of industries. Really, for those in the food space, if you have a subscription-based service where you offer food or products on a regularly scheduled basis, a lot of lawsuits are coming saying it's really hard to get out of these subscriptions. Most of them are based in California, off California's anti-auto renewal law that basically says you have to make it easy for consumers who want to get out of their auto enrollment to get out. And then finally, just running through these quickly in the interest of time, we have the quote free class actions. A lot of these talk about free services, free products, and kind of mesh with the auto enrollment. You buy a product where you're offered a free service for 30 days and then you're auto enrolled. But the one that sort of has the March theme is the free bets. We have seen a number of sports books, online sports books, get hit with class actions alleging that their quote free or risk-free bets aren't actually that. It used to be that there would be a, hey, here's free $100, like deposit $100, get $100 that you can use to bet. Whereas now it's a little more complicated, and the allegations against these sports books are that it's not really risk-free and it's not really free because you're just giving me a credit. I put in $100, I bet $100 I win, you pay it out. But I put in $100, you give me $100, I lose it, I only get $100 credit, and then I have to use it within 14 days, and I don't really actually get that $100 back. So those are relatively new, but we're sort of seeing how they play out in real time. So takeaways, again, the regulatory actions or the preview. These categories of class actions aren't really going anywhere, and they'll continue to go where the consumers are. The online sports betting is relatively new, so it's not surprising to see some of this playing out the way it is. But arbitration clauses and class action waivers are continue to play a key role in defending against these claims, as you see Braxton Key from 2019 blocking Jared Culver at the end of regulation in the national championship to send it to overtime, where my Tony Bennett got to eventually cut down the net. So with that, I will pass it over to Talene.
Hi, everyone. I won't share with you my grave misfortune of being a University of Southern California double Trojan. We're always out in the first round or so, but I hope to do what my team couldn't and go hard in the paint. So with that, let's go to the Proposition 65 update. So over the last couple of months, there's been a number of additions to the Proposition 65 chemical list. As of January 27, 2023, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment added the following chemicals to the list of chemicals known to the state of California to cause cancer for the purposes of Proposition 65. 1-bromo-3-chloropropane is mainly used as an intermediate in the manufacture of pharmaceuticals, such as antidepressants, anti-migraine medications, and local anesthetics. 1-butyl glycidyl ether is used in the manufacture of epoxy resins and as a stabilizer and as a chemical intermediate. And glycidyl methacrylate is used in the production of polymer coatings and finishes, adhesives, and plastics. The warning requirement for significant exposures to these chemicals took effect on January 27, 2020, will take place on January 27, 2024. And then the OEHHA intends to add the following chemicals to the Proposition 65 chemical list. The first is 1,1,1-trichloroethane, and this is primarily used as a metal degreasing and dry cleaning solvent to make other organic chemicals. And the other is glucomalachite green, and this is simply a dye that's used to detect blood. The OEHHA is providing an opportunity for the public to comment on the prospective addition of these chemicals up until April 3rd, 2023. So at the 2022 meeting of the Developmental and Reproductive Toxicant Identification Committee, the group identified 4 pieces of significant litigation. I've gone ahead and put those up for you. We've discussed these in previous webinars, but I just wanted to go ahead and put them up there as a reminder. And then finally, Trent covered this in the start of our webinar, but at the start of this year, there's been multiple class actions that have been filed alleging that companies including Hershey, Lindt, Who, and Trader Joe's are selling chocolate containing unsafe levels of lead and cadmium. So the thing is that these claims are based on a Consumer Report study in December that tested 28 dark chocolate bars. And the analyst chose the lead and cadmium amounts because they are what California has defined as the maximum allowable dose level, thus showing that even though some of this litigation is not moving forward in California, Proposition 65 and the standards that are imposed by Proposition 65 groups have a widespread impact. And with that, I give my time back to the group.
All right, fantastic job, Talene. Talene had she drew the short straw here and went last. Did a great job of keeping us on time. So thank you so much. And obviously, if you have any Prop 65 issues going forward, let us know. Let Talene know, and we're more than happy to talk in a little more depth about some of these. So that's the end of our program. Thank you so much for joining us today. One thing I did want to mention real quick is that we have a popcorn giveaway. Reed, who talked a little bit earlier about Made in the USA, has a cousin in Iowa who owns a gourmet popcorn company, and we're going to be randomly selecting an attendee from today's program, and then we'll send you some of that gourmet popcorn from Reed's cousin. So stay tuned for that, and keep your fingers crossed and hope that you get picked. But thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And we will see you the next time we do one of these. Have a great rest of the day.